Welcome to this edition of One on One. I'm your host, Reed Phillips. Our guest today is the Chief Digital Officer of the Nasdaq, Josh Machiz. Since joining the Nasdaq in 2013, he has spearheaded several initiatives and grown Nasdaq's social media presence to more than 3.5 million followers. In addition to his impressive work on Wall Street, Josh is heavily involved in various activism movements, serving on the board of directors for the gay men's health crisis. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks, Reed. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so my first question, you went to university with the intent of studying microbiology, and you end up with a graduate degree in finance. Where did this leap happen?
Yeah, I think like most young people, thought that I was going to go to school for science because I was good at it in high school and not realizing that that wasn't the career I wanted for my life. And so once I realized that I didn't want a career in science, I really had to figure out something else to do. And really what I was good at in school that I enjoyed was marketing. And so I went back to school, I got my MBA in marketing. And while I was in college, I worked for the CEO of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, who actually lived in New York. I worked as his chief of staff full time while I was going to school getting my MBA. And there, while I'm learning, I was learning all about how stock markets work and how how they operated. And then an opportunity came where they were actually sold to Nasdaq. And that's actually how I got my start at Nasdaq. I started there and I got my first break on the PR team, kind of helping companies kind of navigate. And I when I came in, I said, what do you guys have around kind of social media? Like who's doing who's posting at the bell? And they were like, well, there's an intern who posts photos like the next day. And it was then that I realized that like the next day is dead and that, social media is a now thing and people understand that now, but 6 or 7 years ago, they didn't really understand that was, that was required. And so I built our digital social media presence. And then I really started focusing on building shows for Nasdaq.
I kind of want to take you back to your start at Nasdaq. Like you said, when you get there, there's virtually no social media footprint. What kind of challenges did you run into when you were starting to create this digital voice for such a big company?
Yeah, well, I was lucky because I think often when people try and go and make changes at corporations, there's a lot of gatekeepers that are preventing you from actually making real change. Luckily, I think I picked up on an area where no one was really paying attention and just started building. And I think that's kind of in my blood. I did that with social, I did that with shows, and now I do that with kind of the work that I do pre-IPO with companies and kind of preparing them. Everything I take on at Nasdaq is kind of has that hat of entrepreneurship. And I think it's because it's the company that lets me do it. Like, I don't think that I might be able to get away with kind of building my own little ship every time at another company. But I think because we are this kind of force of innovation, they really value entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. In addition to everything that you do with NASDAQ, you were also on the board of directors for the Gay Men's Health Crisis, one of the first AIDS activism groups in the country. How have you been able to toe the line between this progressive activism and working in corporate America?
Yeah, it's been a hard year for the Gay Men's Health Crisis. Certainly with the pandemic and having to close, there were so many things that we had to deal with. And I've been on the board there for, this is my 7th year as a board member. And it's actually been kind of amazing to see both our CEO and the staff kind of step up to support the community of, primarily Black and Brown HIV positive people who are our clients at the Gay Men's Health Crisis.
Absolutely. When people think about a company like the NASDAQ or Wall Street in general, I think the image that conjures up in one's mind is one of like a conservative world, stiff Wall Street types. But as somebody who lives in both that world and the world of progressive activism, what's your take on how those two worlds collide?
Yeah, I guess I kind of mix all of my worlds together no matter what. I also host our NASDAQ LGBT Leaders Conference. It's a conference I put together for all of our employee groups at our various NASDAQ listed companies to come together and learn from leading LGBTQ executives because I really believe that there is a great connection when you bring your full self to work. And I think that I wouldn't be able to achieve a lot of the things in my life if not for my queerness. And I think that that's something that a lot of people undervalue, is that their differences are actually such value generators, not just for themselves, but for the companies they work for and the company they keep. And so really, I think that's my strength, is I really do bring my full self to everything. And I'm not someone who like masks in terms of like hiding my sexuality or who I am. I'm very much just, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And hopefully you leave it, because I bring a lot to the table.
That's really great to hear, somebody who's, coming up on entering the workforce for sure. Want to pivot to another one of your initiatives that you mentioned, mission driven, highlighting companies that are actively making these positive changes. How rewarding has this experience been, getting to work up close and personal and also showcasing these companies that are making change?
I mean, it's been incredible hearing what companies are doing. And honestly, just you hear how passionate their employees are. When I interviewed a company called Braze, their employees were just so excited by all the work they were doing, in support of the BLM movement and thinking about how they could show up. They joined this kind of group of startups called Tech for Black Founders, where they actually gave away their technology to any Black, brown founders of color who want to start a company and want to use their product. And it's doing stuff like that where you're giving back to communities, to underrepresented minorities, to founders who are not getting the equal opportunity. And like doing things like that actually just makes people want to stay at a company much longer, because you just have that connection of like that you're doing something more than just selling a product. And seeing that has just been really powerful. Certainly when I talk to Canva, everybody knows the design software, and it's an incredible piece of software. But the other thing they do is they volunteer with a nonprofit called Leap Africa, and they actually go to Africa and teach young people the skills of like branding and social media and like all the tools you need to be an effective entrepreneur.
Absolutely. That actually leads me into my next question. I think a lot of people, especially, young, maybe more cynical people, see these companies, they say, they're advocating for BLM or they're advocating for the LGBTQ community. And a lot of people think, oh, they're just trying to help their image. This is a publicity move rather than a genuine attempt to actually harvest a more progressive space. But as somebody who works so closely with these companies, what is your perspective?
Yeah, well, I'm very intentional about who we choose for the show, because certainly I know that one thing that both millennial and Gen Z audiences do not like, it's inauthenticity. And we certainly would never feature anyone that, is kind of trying to talk the talk without actually walking the walk. And it's actually it's surprisingly easy to tell the difference between companies who talk about doing social good and are actually doing social good.
Absolutely. Well, that is really great to hear. I have one last question for you. As a group of students that are about to enter the workforce, do you have any advice on how to navigate the arena of employment but still remain true to yourself and the values that are important to you?
Well, I'm excited for everyone, because I feel like young people today have so many opportunities. There's so many great companies to work for that, are hiring. And I think certainly my advice, whether you've interned, well, that internships are like the gateway to every great corporate job for sure. But even if you haven't, that reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and just explaining your background in a really short way and saying why you want to work at that company, it's always about the foot in the door. I know I wouldn't have gotten to Nasdaq without somebody helping me put a foot in the door. And I think that that's the way it always is. And that, the biggest waste of time is sending all those resumes to the aggregators, because in this life, it often, comes down to who you know. And if you don't know somebody, make a new friend.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. Your insight was really valued, and it was great to catch up with you.
Great to talk to you, Reed. Thank you so much for having me.
It was seriously a pleasure. You can follow Josh on Instagram. His handle is @Machiz. Very cool that you got your last name as your handle.
I'm at Matches on every profile. And you can
Also,
follow at Mission Driven on Instagram too, which is my show if you want to learn more about the series.
yes, please follow them. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for another edition of One on One.